I ponder as I sit waiting in radiology about accumulated radiation emissions from X-rays being absorbed by everything. The lights, walls, floor, furniture, and abstract paintings on the walls seem to glow. I feel a hyper-irritating sensation, as if my nerves and bones want to wear an ultraviolet shield. I wonder if Dr. Braisley told the radiologist to make me wait here for the last 2 hours. Could he be punishing me for questioning his analysis and diagnosis? Jeff is upstairs needing the honey butter mix. It's 11 p.m., and few patients have passed through this department, and there's no backlog. Why is it taking so long? I also wonder if the older radiologists are balding from exposure to these low levels of radiation. Is it absorbed into their skulls, gradually making the follicles impotent at producing hair? Mr. Marshall, the white-uniformed, partially balding radiologist says as he approaches me. I consider accepting Jeff's adopted name, Marshall, for the moment. I could avoid explaining my relation to Jeff, but I don't want Ben being mistaken for me, considering my radical presence in the hospital. I explain as the radiologist takes me into a room. Aisles of open shelves full of X-ray files line most of the floor space. On one wall is mounted a row of backlit white opaque glass with X-rays hanging against them. They are of Jeff's head taken by CAT scan. I see 3 oval areas that portend severe brain damage. I see images of Jeff crashing through glass. I cringe and take a deep breath. The radiologist points to the spots. These are filling with fluids and creating pressure on Jeff's brain. The doctors are going to tap and drain them to prevent further brain damage. I listen to the prognosis without comment. I visualize them assaulting Jeff's body as they drill into his skull. I know if I tell the radiologist that fresh, raw green vegetable juices and no salt added raw cheese could help draw out the fluids without drilling into Jeff's head, he'd have me in a circus by day's end. I have to get Jeff out of the coma so he can eat. I realize the next step is to eliminate consciousness-interfering drugs. Wait, stop. I wonder if Jeff wants to live. I won't force his soul to stay in his body if it wants to leave. Somehow, I must get his permission. I thank the radiologist and go back to Jeff. Mary and a nurse wrestle Jeff's arms and convulsing body down. Jeff's subconscious has burst through and pulls out the urinary catheter. The bulb at the end is inflated. It tears his urethra. Blood spurts and spatters from his penis everywhere on him and the sheets. Can't you see his body doesn't want the thing in him? I say. He'll be wetting the bed constantly, and he's too big and heavy for us to be changing him all the time, the nurse says, annoyed. I know I'm not going to be around every 45 minutes to change a diaper in bed, so I don't say any more. Mary tells me, as if confessing, that Jeff had pulled the catheter twice before. I shudder. I remember that after stomach surgery, I had sharp burning pain in my penis when I urinated. I felt as if I were being painfully electrocuted during orgasm, with the electrodes connected to my urethra. It still happens occasionally. Now I wonder if I had unconsciously pulled my catheter. Had I ripped the tissues and damaged the nerves? Is that what made my urethra so sensitive? The nurse and Mary finish changing the sheets and Jeff's gown. One nurse reinserts the catheter, the other leaves. Mary tells me she's taking a snack break and goes. The last nurse leaves. I lean close to Jeff's head. I give him entrancing suggestions. I repeat them until I see that he is probably hypnotized. I tell him I want to speak to his psyche, spirit. I ask him if he wants to live. I suggest the slightest positive or negative response. A vague movement up or down for yes, to either side for no, from his head or hands or his eyes behind his closed eyelids. He gives no response. I assume that he has chosen death. A lump forms in my throat. I recall my near-death experience of 17 years ago when I was 22. I was experimenting with mind expansion to find specific answers about my health and reality. It was early spring. I had already put my cancer in remission with diet, but I still had multiple health troubles. My youngest uncle, Lanny, who had been studying for his doctorate in psychology and worked as a teaching assistant at the University of California, Los Angeles, was guiding me. We had consumed psilocybin, a manufactured chemical form of an hallucinogen, and smoked a mixture of hashish and marijuana. At first, Lon and I had a wonderful experience communicating telepathically. Then the pleasant effects of the drugs had worn off, and my mind was normal again. Then I realized I was having an extremely adverse reaction. My blood pressure was dangerously low. It was 86 degrees inside my apartment, but I was freezing. My lower back ached so badly I couldn't sit or stand comfortably. That was normal, but this pain was approaching unbearable. I remember lying on the floor next to the floor heater. "I'm still freezing." "It's all in your mind. Imagine a fire," Lanny said. I imagined sitting next to a fire. Then I imagined the fire inside my body. This provided a bit of relief but did not raise my blood pressure. "I'm still freezing and my back aches. It's all in your mind," Lanny said. I rose from the couch and turned the heater to the highest temperature. I stood on top of the heater in my tennis shoes. Lanny began to complain that he was suffering heat prostration. "Isn't it all in your mind?" I asked. He rose from the couch and left. I noticed the hands on the clock pointed to 12:47 p.m. As I stood on the heater, I was slightly more comfortable. I became aware that my skin was turning ashen. I was weakening. I fell back slouching against the wall. I thought I was losing consciousness, but instead I turned inside out with a pop. I detached from my body. I felt free and whole. I knew this experience was not an hallucination, and I became frightened. Then I realized there was nothing to fear, and my fear disappeared. I left my body. I hovered above it, circling. My body was still propped against the wall, dead. Of all things, I was leaving my body with fresh pizza stains on my shirt. What would Mom think if she knew I died with pizza stains on my shirt? Suddenly, I drifted upward through the ceiling, through the upstairs apartment, the roof, and into the sky. I flew into the stratosphere and glided through it. Everything went dark as if it were a moonless night, except the stars, which were clear, and the earth, which glowed. I traveled backward toward the sun, faster until the earth became pea-sized. Suddenly I realized that I had an invisible form. I felt an intense brightness penetrating me from behind. It was the sun. I turned inside out to look toward the sun. After I turned inside out this time, I saw in all directions at once. I sped into the sun. It seemed like a bright white tunnel. Inside the sun, I turned inside out again. Population. I seemed liquid now. I swelled like an invisible balloon. I had become the sun. I wondered how that was possible. The answer came instantly. It was simply the nature of that reality. Then my stratosphere, my skin, dissolved. Like water, I seeped through all of creation. I experienced an infinite sense of oneness, and I was all that is. I enjoyed eternity briefly. The ultimate oxymoron, I thought. I laughed, and every particle in creation laughed. Although so obvious, I realized that laughter is an expression of joy. Joy is the appreciation of creation, of beingness. I realized that without joy, a sense of separateness ensues, and then fear. Beingness loses its sense of love that unites everything. Joy is more important than I had ever imagined. Then I formed into a tornado-like mass. I focused my consciousness in the calm center. I watched lives swirl around me. In that whirlpool of lives, I saw that I had been a sun, many lives on many planets, and other existences that I cannot describe. I relived each of those lives from birth to death with tremendous speed, yet I seemed to understand more. Emotions were the gauge of experience here, that is, what I and everybody felt and thought as a result of my actions was all important. The importance of these lives was creating joy, love, unconditional love. Finally, I glimpsed a lonely, unhappy, unloved, and sometimes unloving life in this whirlpool. It was full of resentment. It was my dick life. I relived that life. I felt sick, weak, and angry. I realized that for my life to be happy, I had to love myself completely. I had to heal my instincts and intuition. Through instinct, my body communicates with me. Through intuition, my psyche, soul, or spirit communicates with me. I knew that every decision should be a trilateral agreement between my psyche, intuition, body, instinct, and mind, reason, in that order. I saw that health and happiness in my earth reality started at the most basic level, my body. I saw that my body cells were loving, feeling, and intelligent. I should have loved them more, listened to them, helped them enjoy life. My cells wanted to experience so much more with me, but they were strained, exhausted, and deformed from environmental and dietary adulterations. I realized that I had wanted to love my cells all along. Their love was evident, trying to help me enjoy life. I wanted them to enjoy being part of me. With as much effort, I wanted to love my cells as much as they loved me. But conditioning and education confused my instincts and intuition. I had been forced to mistrust myself. Now, I thought, if I had it to do over again, I would take better care of my cells, to heal my cells. I saw that the cells in food were alive, loving, feeling, and intelligent also. I saw that cooking food kills most of its vitality that we would receive if we were to eat food fresh and raw. I saw how much disease, pain, and unhappiness comes from eating dead, toxic food. I realized that my body cells could have gradually transmuted to magnificent health in several decades of care if I would have eaten raw foods. Also, I realized that I had chosen the diseased state, my diseased life, to learn about and create health. I felt excitement growing. I felt overwhelmed with compassion. I wanted to return to Earth. I would literally reverse the direction of my life from the inside out. Instantly, a change came over me. I became a black hole and I traveled at many times the speed of light. I realized that my desire was sending me back to Earth. I felt whole again, loved and loving, recharged with vital, loving purpose. I traveled through the psychic umbilical cord, a black hole, to my pitiful, dead physical body on the heater. I exploded into my body, turning outside in. My body bolted upright. The power of my love started my heart beating again and warmed it. My blood began to move again sluggishly. I was still ashen. I smelled burning rubber. With tremendous effort, I opened my heavy eyelids. I was looking down at my tennis-shoed feet on the heater's grill. I noticed the maroon telephone cord had melted black and was about to catch fire. I couldn't control any part of my body except my eyes. I felt a bit panicked. My adrenaline rushed. The hands of the clock pointed to 4:17 p.m. My body had been dead 3.5 hours. Slowly, my body began responding to my thoughts. I flipped the telephone cord off, but it fragmented, melted onto the grill. I tried to step off the grill, but my tennis shoes were melted to it. I was exhausted and sick. I forced myself to pull hard. Finally, my shoes released. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a barbecue fork. I returned to the heater. I removed the grill with the fork. I trudged with it to the back driveway and put it down. I felt the warmth of the sun on my body, and I relaxed. I felt more alive every second. Many of my cells were returning to life. The thought of delicious, heavily buttered garlic bread came to mind. I knew it was instinct, my body telling me what it needed to raise my blood pressure. I went back into my apartment and ate a little crushed raw garlic with fresh raw unripe pineapple, lots of raw unsalted butter, and a little French bread. I hadn't eaten bread in 13 years. Except of a little digestive difficulty from the cooked bread, within moments I felt better, satisfied. I decided from then on that at least 70% of my diet would consist of raw foods. I remember that was 2.5 years before my experience with Monica in the hospital. I went to bed. I fell asleep knowing instinctively and intuitively that sleep is where I would do most of my healing. I become aware that I am in the hospital at Jeff's side. I touch his cheek. "Do you want to live, Jeff?" I ask again. I watch him intently for an eternal minute, anticipating, hoping for any indication from him. "Goodbye, son. I wish you happiness wherever you've gone." Suddenly, Jeff's voice surges loudly and clearly past the tubes. "Live,